back when I was in a history class in high school, I memorized the names and dates of every US president from Washington until either Clinton or W. Class, they were both president that year, and I don't remember when we had to do this assignment. Anyway, and 25-ish years later, I still can't. I'm just kidding. I cannot whatsoever. And as I was preparing, I literally wasn't sure who came after Washington, so that does not bode well. It's Adams, by the way, and not John Quincy. He was number 6. There, that's that mistake. Well, I have no doubt that class helped form the foundation of my later understandings of the United States history. I can't remember anything specific that I learned that entire year. Anything except for one thing. And it's not the presidents, as we already know. It was, in my memory, the first day of class. Mr. Lane got up there and asked us all, if you were trying to figure out if something actually happened and you weren't there to see it firsthand, which set of facts would convince you? Option 1 is 6 eyewitness accounts that all describe the alleged event exactly the same way. Or option B, 6 eyewitness accounts that all describe the alleged event entirely differently from each other. I'm curious what you all think. If it's option 1, raise your hand. If it's option 2, raise your hand, and if you don't want to participate, fine. Okay. All right, Shabbat Shalom, thank you. No, well done. I know at the time that I got it wrong. I know now that I would get it right, but I have no idea what I would have answered had I not managed to hold on to this one singular idea from the very first day of class that I do not honestly remember taking much of. This week, we're starting the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy literally means the second telling, a repetition. Here's where we get a retelling of all the things that we have, frankly, already read about in the Torah, including among this a second listing of the 10 Commandments. Except some of the details have changed. When it comes to the 10 Commandments, they are, broadly speaking, identical. However, we are Jews, and Jews don't really do broadly speaking. We are descendants of people who, if you heard this sermon a couple of months ago, have counted literally every letter of the Torah and then every word of the Torah, and then argued for centuries about which method would be a better way to calculate the center of the Torah. In other words, we get into the weeds. The most famous example of a discrepancy in the 10 Commandments, here it is. You may be familiar with it. In Exodus, that's where we read the 10 Commandments for the first time. Commandment number 4 is to remember Shabbat. Remember Shabbat. And here in Deuteronomy, it's also about Shabbat, but it says to keep Shabbat. Keep, shamor, remember, zachor. Shamor, v'zachor, b'dibor, echad. Sing it with me, those who are here for the beginning of the service. It's the first stanza of Lachadodi. And in English, to translate the whole line, keep and remember will be in a single word. I'm adding a few extra helper words there, but that's what it says. To keep and to remember will be in one word. You may have read that and had no idea what on earth that was supposed to mean, but now you know what Shlomo Alkabetz, the author of Lachadodi, was talking about. Reconciling this discrepancy. But back to the larger issue. What do we make of the commandment written one way in one place and differently somewhere else? Does that make the whole text less authoritative or trustworthy? Remember, for most of Jewish history, the Torah was seen to be, and still is by many, but was seen to be universally for most of Jewish history, the perfect words written by a perfect God transmitted through the ages perfectly. A perfect God doesn't make mistakes, full stop. However, even an not quite but almost perfect God that makes some mistakes, doesn't seem like God would make this one when it comes to the 10 Commandments of all things. So back to Mr. Lane's question, consistency or diversity of retelling of an event. We already know the answer. And even though in that class in my memory, almost all of us answered option A, that you would want consistency and all these accounts to be exactly the same. And I believe that there was one student who was the contrarian who said option B. Well done, all of you. And they got a better score on the AP US History exam than I did because that one student was right. Despite all that's happened over the last year or so, many students got better scores than me on the AP US History exam. Sorry, let's be clear. It's not impressive. I do believe in the concept of objective reality, despite all that has happened over the last year in this country and this world. But objective reality, I believe, still exists. It either rained at 10 o'clock this morning or it did not. That basketball team scored more points than their opponents, or they did not, or they tied, or you get the idea, but it happened. Reality is objective. Yes, I believe that, but we, humans, we are not objective. Track down the other 20 or so classmates of mine and ask them to describe what happened on that first day of class. I'm certain you will get 20 different descriptions. And yes, we can blame a quarter century of faded memories. However, I am certain that if you'd asked us all the day after that class, heck, the minute after that class, you'd still have 20 different descriptions. And if that sounds absurd to you or like an exaggeration, I invite everyone to write down a brief summary of what I am talking about right now, and let's compare what we wrote at the Oneg. I suspect for anyone that's not in this room who looks at the summaries, it will appear that you all heard different sermons. And that takes me to what I really want to talk about tonight, and what has been on my mind increasingly over the last year, or is related to something on my mind over the last year. Earlier this week, I shared with the congregation a message from the URJ, the Union for Reform Judaism, our national body of Reformed congregations in North America. And the resolution, or the message I shared, was titled, Reform Movement Statement on the Starvation in Gaza. I shared that along with my own message. I received many responses. Almost all were appreciative of the message, but a handful were not. I received a few emails that said some version of, Rabbi, there is no starvation in Gaza. I suspect most people in this room think that there is, and possibly some here think that there is not. But either way, how do you know? I am all but certain none of us have eyewitness experience, have been in Gaza lately, or even close to lately. And even then, even if you had been, you can't be in all of Gaza all the time. Maybe there is hunger that's rampant in some areas, but not in others. Maybe there was one area that did not have access to food for an entire week. And again, try not eating for a week and let me know how it feels. That is an unbelievable problem if that is true, and this is all hypothetical. Maybe there was an area that didn't have food for a week, but that was months ago, and they have had no issues since. Anyway, we don't even have that limited view. So we're left to rely on those who do. But, as many of you probably know, media is not allowed to travel freely in Gaza and has very limited access. And again, that could be for very reasonable reasons. It is an active war zone. Or it could be for less reasonable reasons. And we don't know. Why are there not more pictures of starving people? Maybe it's because there aren't any starving people. Or maybe it's because the IDF will never allow photographers to travel to areas where they are. And I have absolutely no way to say with any certainty which answer is right. So then, why did I send the statement? And I will tell you the simple answer, and I acknowledge it might not have been the right one. I sent the statement because the URJ sent it. And I know most of the names on the bottom of that letter that they wrote. And again, this is not a brag. None of them know who I am. But I know them, and I trust and respect them. And I trust the URJ would not make such an assessment unless they were certain, unless they had vetted the information. That was enough for me to say something is happening that I have not witnessed and have no way to personally verify. Like I said, I may not have gotten this right. That's not the same as saying that I got it wrong. It's saying that if you really push me, the best I can say is that I believe this is happening because sources I trust tell me that it is. And yet, as some congregants shared with me, there are other sources that I had not seen. And I did not know that this was up for debate. I will admit that. Other sources that say that this is not happening. Some of these folks who responded to my email shared some of the sources with me. I read them. I watched them. I thought back to Mr. Lane's question about how it is possible for two people to see the same thing, to have the same access to the same information, and come to completely different conclusions about what it is that they saw. Shamor v'Zachor. The mystical point of that line is that somehow God will resolve the irresolvable and make 1 + 1 = 1. And maybe God can do that, but we can't. We're left with multiple tellings, multiple Deuteronomies that differ and maybe even contradict each other outright, and it is up to us to try and understand how to navigate this and what to make of it all. And this is the larger issue I have been struggling with. How do we do that? It feels harder and harder to have any idea at all about what is real and what is not. Some folks asked me how I knew that the picture that I chose to include of an emaciated child was legitimate. I told them it's because it was the lead photograph on the World Health Organization's, WHO's homepage, and captioned, "A starving child in Gaza." And the response, "But Rabbi, how do you know that it's legitimate?" I conceded I did not. I trusted the WHO. But just like the URJ, maybe they got it wrong. But if you can't trust the URJ, you can't trust the WHO, you can't trust the New York Times or the LA Times or your news feed or your rabbi, what are you supposed to do? It feels to me like it creates paralysis, and that terrifies me. Even before our current season of disinformation, objective certainty was never possible. I learned that a quarter century ago from Mr. Lane. However, paralysis, I believe, is not the answer. As I have said, I have no way to know whether people are currently starving with certainty. So I'm just not going to have any opinion or make any attempt to do any action. I don't believe that is the response. The stakes are high when it comes to issues like this. They are very high. If I believe people are starving and they are not, I have just made myself a vector of misinformation, and misinformation that is dangerous, that has permanently tarnished Israel's reputation, as we see by the way the world is reacting around us. But on the other hand, if I believe people are not starving, but actually they are, I have just stood by and allowed people to die. Neither of these are good outcomes. So what to do? I'll share my answer with the caveat I'll probably have a different one next week. I rely on sources I trust. I make reasonable efforts to vet information through multiple sources. I make the best call I can based on the information I have. And all the while, I remind myself, I could absolutely be wrong. I must continue to seek new information and allow myself to change my mind, to not let pride keep me from truth. I've made this commitment to a few folks over the last few days, and I would like to make it publicly to the congregation. If I discover evidence that the picture I included in the message was misleading or the claim of mass starvation is inaccurate, I will immediately send a retraction and an apology. These are the things that keep me up at night, knowing that I may be responsible for spreading falsehoods. That is the last thing I would want to do. But no matter how hard I try, I have, and I will now, and I will in the future, continue to say things with authority that turn out only after the fact to be untrue. I'm sure I've already done that. That's what I wrote here. You've also already done that. You've heard the statistics about how much misinformation there is on social media and out there. You really think it's just other people who are falling for it? But this is the commitment I can make. I will continue to place truth over pride. I will never knowingly make false claims. I will never say, as some do, and some thought maybe I was trying to do, well, I don't care if that child is actually from Gaza because it doesn't matter because it's representative. It does matter, and I would never do that. I will make reasonable efforts to fact-check my own facts. And when I do fail, and I will, when I am made aware I have failed, I will acknowledge it. I'll do my best to correct it. As of this afternoon, an hour ago when I was finishing this, I still believe it is likely that people in Gaza are suffering due to a lack of access to food. I still believe that the WHO did not put a picture on their homepage of their website that was not accurate. But I can't stand here and tell you that I am certain because if I'm being honest, certainty is impossible. We all have to accept that. We all have to concede we are reliant on the honesty of others to understand the world around us. This world is too big for us to personally make sense of it on our own. Maybe there is irrefutable evidence out there pointing one way or another that I have yet to see. And if that's the case, Whatever the evidence, whichever way it leads, please show it to me. But until then, we have to be responsible. We have to be active in the world and not succumb to paralysis. We have to understand no matter how sure we think we are, we can absolutely still be wrong. And we've got to be comfortable deciding that, at least sometimes, we have to act on the best information we have available at the time and not resort to paralysis, lest the world continue to burn around us as it is so disturbingly that I don't need to tell you about. Shabbat Shalom. I look forward to your thoughts. I'm sure that you have many, either at the Oneg or please send them to me. And thank you. And please, I hope it goes without saying, whether you like what I say or don't like what I say, I want to hear from you regardless. And I appreciate these conversations greatly. I enjoy having my mind changed. It's a good thing for all of us.